Let's get the meeting underway. So Independence Township Downtown Development Authority, today is Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. It's 5:01 p.m. I am Dave Gittens, and so let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Brian, you're going to take roll call, sir?
Sure. DDA board members first. Supervisor Aliaga.
Here.
Ms. Dishin, she is absent tonight. Mr. Gittens.
Here.
Ms. Harper.
Here.
Ms. Margraf.
Here.
Mr. Milzo is absent. Mr. Morocco.
Here.
Mr. Neiman is absent, and Mr. Yankee looks like he's absent. We do have a quorum. Citizens Advisory Board, I'm going to do that next. Mr. Bertolini.
Here.
Mr. Brooks.
Here.
Ms. Carson.
Here.
Mr. Doolin.
Here.
Mr. Gale is absent, and Mr. and Ms. Gasho are absent. Ms. Hanson.
Here.
Ms. Keller.
Here.
And Ms. Poplawski is absent.
All right, thank you, Brian. So the next agenda item is for the approval of the minutes from last meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes?
No.
No.
Actually, 2 members just arrived. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Second.
All right, approved and seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No?
All opposed.
Okay, all right, that's approved.
Mhm.
Presentations, are there any presentations for this evening? I don't believe so. Item F, public comments. Does anybody from the public want to comment before we get underway? No? Nobody online? Okay. The next agenda item is to review the agenda. So, excited for that. Jose,
Hmm?
can you advise how we review the agenda?
Yeah,
Looks good.
yeah, it looks good.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay.
And second?
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chair, we might need, I don't know if we need to recognize the 2 members that came in late.
Okay.
Do we need to, Brian?
Yeah, just make a note that they've arrived.
Mrs. Gasco and Mrs. Poplawski.
Okay. You making a note of that?
Yes.
Okay. Item H, so financial matters, none yet. And I, reports, recommendations, and resolutions, and we will review the DDA development plan. Mr. Carlisle, I know that we have 2 changes, and
I think since we do have a few new members, or not new members, members that, of the CAC that didn't, were able to be here at the last meeting, if it's okay, I will just go over it, give a brief overview of the plan with your permission.
sure.
Okay. Don't want to overstep my bounds.
No, you're fine.
For the benefit of anyone that didn't hear the presentation at the previous meeting, this is, we are essentially resurrecting an existing DDA that was originally established in 1986 and that was never formally dissolved, and went and sought legal opinion, verifying the fact that we were able to reinstitute the DDA because it had never been discontinued, but that we would need to do a couple of different things. We would, one, need to appoint a new DDA board, and two, we'd have to develop and adopt a development and tax increment finance plan, which is the document that I presented to you at the last meeting. So that is essentially where we're at. We started this process with meeting with the county about this particular matter. We did provide legal opinion to the township board. Township board, reinstituted the DDA. The ordinance was already in place. It simply had to be amended to conform to the current law, and that's how we've gotten to this point. Because we have more than 100 residents living in the downtown development district, we are required by law to have a citizens advisory committee to review the plan and make a recommendation to the Downtown Development Board, which is the folks up here, as to whether you would recommend the plan be approved or not. The DDA board then is the body that makes a recommendation to the township board that the plan, that they make a recommendation of the approval of the plan. Ultimately, the final authority with approval of the plan rests with the township board after the public notice is given in accordance with the law and a public hearing is conducted. So there will be a public, so obviously there's a fairly lengthy process and fairly lengthy public transparent process before the plan is finally put into effect. Once it goes into effect, then the Downtown Development Authority is the body that implements the plan under the direction of the Township Board, and certainly with the concurrence of the Township Board. The Downtown Development Authority has to present an annual budget to the Township Board. And obviously, if there's going to be any future plans of borrowing against tax increment finance revenues, that has to be done with the concurrence and the approval of the Township Board. So you just don't have carte blanche up here to do anything you want to do. And that's the case, in every one of these types of authorities. So again, the plan is, much of the plan is structured to meet the requirements of the law, so that we provide the background data, the context in which this plan is presented. And as we know, the district extends all the way along Dixie Highway from Waterford Township boundary to Deer Hill. It goes north on M15 to the southern boundary of I want to say the village, and I get in trouble every time, the city of the village. And down White Lake Road to Andersonville Road. So that's the extent of the downtown development district. Obviously, in that district, quite varied conditions, quite varied land use. But the township's done a lot of planning over the years. Economic conditions have, in many cases, not been kind to certain portions of the corridors. In other cases, it's been fine. But this is the township board viewed this as an opportunity to arrest some of the conditions that we saw and really promote redevelopment of the corridor. And that's really what the projects, that's what the goals and priorities that are set out on the plan speak to. I mean, this is all about reinvestment in real estate improvement in the corridor. And the programs and projects that we identify are intended to try to stimulate reinvestment of private dollars into the corridor. So that's really what it's directed. Now, as I've also mentioned many times, our tax increment dollars are not the only dollars that we are going to rely upon. In fact, it's a mistake to think that. Our tax increment dollars are going to be sort of the seed money to stimulate our ability to leverage other sources of funding that may come from other public sources, some private sources, some grants, other types of programs that we might be able to avail ourselves of. But I never view TIF financing as sort of an end source of financing. It's really sort of the beginning to give you the opportunity. And this is exactly the experience that we had with our Corridor Improvement Authority as Mr. Bernalini knows, that we really leveraged a lot of dollars from other sources, from the county, from the state, from private sector, in terms of being able to really compound the dollars that we were generating through tax increment finance dollars. And I think you can see that it has resulted in, the stimulation of development and the increase in tax base in the township, to the point in the Corridor Improvement Authority that the bonds that were taken out to finance the improvements are going to be, in all likelihood, and I think with all pretty certainty, are going to be paid off early, which is pretty remarkable. So the description of the improvements are set forth predominantly in pages 16, 17, and 18 of the plan. And they range anything from, trying to create images and new entryway signage to some streetscape improvements. One of the things that we're really excited about is the safety path, being able to really improve our non-motorized transportation along the corridor. Right now, we have, many areas that we have gaps in that. We also have areas where we have these really deteriorating paved shoulders that went in when the highway was widened, and they're ridiculous, terrible to maintain. In many cases, safety hazard because they're not really intended to be pathways. They're intended to be paved shoulders, but we have people using them. We've had conversations with MDOT, and they're actually very supportive of us trying to replace that with a pathway system that ties into the balance of our safety pass system in the township. Traffic safety improvements are a high priority. The intersection at White Lake and Dixie is a mess. Traffic gets backed up, in all different directions there. So we know something needs to be done there. And just like we did, we made improvements to Sashabelle-Walden intersection. We know that there needs to be some improvements made there. We know that there are some other traffic safety issues along Dixie Highway that are not conducive to promoting business because of traffic speeds, access issues, certain conditions that I think create concerns about safety, definitely pedestrian safety, particularly in the stretch between Maybe and M15, where we have, a concentration of businesses, a concentration of curb cuts and accesses, and places where we have people walking across the road, like to go look at cars, for example. So we know that these are some issues that that need to be addressed and should be a priority. Speed from Andersonville to Maybe Road is a problem. We have a 2-mile stretch without any break in the traffic. This has been something that's been documented in previous township plans and studies. And so these are the kinds of things that this body can start to make a priority in terms of coming up with solutions. And the tax increment finance plan is only a partial means to get to an end of trying to make these improvements. We also have some utility improvements. These are in the plan. In all likelihood, there will be very little TIF dollars associated with those. It'll be predominantly dollars that will be probably from other sources of funds, but we do put them in the plan in case there are circumstances where some supplemental dollars might be needed that could be provided through the DDA to stimulate a particular thing that we'd like to see happen, that utilities are needed for extension. And then I also included a small line item in here for property acquisition. There might be some circumstances, particularly with safety pass or with the gateway signage, where we need to acquire easements or acquire property in order to achieve some of our objectives. One of the things that I was requested to do is make sure that I indicated in here that there is going to be some administrative costs. And Chairman, I think you specifically asked for that. So I did put a paragraph in here that we estimate that that the administrative and just general consulting costs would not exceed $25,000 a year. I came up with this figure by talking to the township budget director because we have some experience with this with the CIA. Now, there'll obviously be consulting costs for projects, but those will be built into the cost of the project. But the overall cost of managing and administering and running the DDA will mostly be done by township personnel and perhaps to some extent by our office. But so I put that cost in there as an estimate, and I also include that in the table that lays out what all of the costs are. So the table on page 20, it continues to reflect the costs of the projects that I presented to you at the last meeting. I have added in the administrative costs in there, and I continue to identify the sources of funding, which could be, again, from a variety of sources. So, in a nutshell, in an overview, that is the overview of the plan. And I think we should, entertain any questions or any comments, Mr. Chairman, from either the CAC first, perhaps, or the township, the DDA. That's totally up to you how you want to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I'd like to hear from the CAC about if they have any comments, if they have any recommendations, anything that they want to see as we move forward in this particular stretch of road. You guys live in that community. We all live in the community, but you guys are, affected because you all live there. So, feel free. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. First, because the DDA was dormant, were there any TIF captures for the years that it was dormant? And if there were, what happened to all that money?
There were not.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
I was just curious, 'cause
Yeah.
all those years, so the DDA was on the books, but they never captured the millage?
No,
Okay,
actually, they
excellent.
stopped capturing it was a 10-year sunset on the plan. And the capture was completed, and the plan expired,
Okay,
and that's what happened.
that was in 2006 it expired?
No, it was, it was actually, let me see,
96 it actually
1996, yeah.
expired in 96?
But the board was never, the DDA was never, was never dissolved.
Yeah. No, okay.
And the state kept asking us for where our annual reports were.
Yeah, because they're wondering if you're capturing money, right? Exactly. So, but then my only other question is when you talk about safety pathways, and I'm guessing sidewalks fall into safety pathways, and I'm thinking Dixie, on White Lake Road south of Dixie Highway, we have one side of the road where the sidewalk terminates.
Yeah.
Is that, those are the kinds of things that would be covered here?
Yeah.
And then you would leverage other sources of dollars to help
That's correct.
move
We,
those forward?
we want to fill in the gaps where
Okay.
the safety path exists. And the township has already been pursuing that with the state. I mean, not there, but to complete the safety path out here. So we are definitely going, and we've actually had a meeting with SEMCOG, because they're the clearinghouse for those types of funds, to provide that. And there is, when it comes to a lot of this infrastructure funding, there is a fair amount of dollars that are now available for non-motorized transportation. I mean, it's part of legislatively it's being required, and there's a fair amount of funding, and we have a very excellent safety pass system, but we also have a safety pass system where we cover a lot of territory. This township has had a safety pass system since 1980, and they've had a voted millage, quite unlike many communities, to build safety paths and to support that and maintain that safety path system. So it's a pretty remarkable story in this township that for 43 years, this township has built and supported a safety path system that is not only built by taxpayer dollars, but developer dollars. Whenever they develop, they have to put a safety path in also. So that's, and grants, okay? We've also pursued a lot of grants. So this I think is also a priority on Dixie Highways, to try to get that safety pass system in and complete. much more aesthetically pleasing than it is right now in many cases.
What, if we don't capture the money for this project, where do those funds go?
Back to the taxing jurisdictions, yeah. Now, just remember that with the tax increment financing, all the taxing jurisdictions will still get all the taxes they're getting right now. It's just that the whole idea with tax increment financing is to capture the increased value. And that's what the whole intention of it is, and to invest those dollars back into the district.
Go ahead.
I just want to add tonight that last night I presented to the board a proposal to hire a 1099 employee grant writer. And the board unanimously support that. This grant writer primary job is gonna be helping each department of the township to find more grants, and it's gonna work dedicating also to help us to the DDA. So by having this person, it's gonna help expedite when we apply for grants, grant money from the federal government. We already established communication with Lisa McLean, our current congresswoman. Her office is gonna help us to get more grants, also for the DDA. Now with the approach what we done last night, approving this, we're gonna have the grant writer that's gonna help us to expedite some grants. So that is already approved. So we're gonna be in the process to posting this job and position, and we're gonna be looking for a grant writer soon, and that's gonna help us a lot as well.
Make sure the first document you give them is a DDA plan.
Of course, and we already actually meet
Yeah.
with people from the state, with
Yeah.
Mike Harris as well, and other elected officials there already told us they're gonna help us out. But when I talked to the directors, one of the question they brought to my attention where we need a grant writer, because we can identify so many grants, but we need a grant writer in order to get those grants, and that's already been addressed and it's already approved. So it's looking very good for us. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea when they might be hired?
So it got approved last night. We're gonna post him most likely by Monday or Tuesday. We're working on it, and then we're gonna be looking for candidates as well. One of the things that we're looking is the right candidate, because federal grants are very difficult, and we need to get a talented person that can able to write those grants for the federal level. So, but we already approved. We already moving forward about this. Yeah.
Okay. You guys have any other questions or concerns or things you'd like to see or not see? What's that?
So traffic studies.
Okay.
Is this also an area where grants could potentially be used? Or are there traffic studies that are already scheduled to happen, for instance, on White Lake Road or Dixie Highway? Is there anything like that been begun? Been begun? That's good English.
No, there's nothing, there has been, but there's nothing current. And, yeah, certainly, I mean, I think that we can, we'll certainly, that's, I think, within the scope of this, to be able to pursue that too also.
Because whatever you do to White Lake and Dixie is going to impact downstream. So
Yep.
there's buses picking up kids, there's all kinds of things going on White Lake Road. So whatever you do to that intersection to change the traffic pattern is going to change everything
Right.
down the road. So if they're going to,
Yep.
so, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And, and I try to warn people about this, this, I know we'll all have this expectation that everything's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I know that,
I'm a realist.
that, Phil. But this is gonna be a long-term prospect to get these things done. But if you don't start, you'll never accomplish anything, so.
Just questioning, does anyone know the last time that perhaps Oakland County did the traffic study for those intersections?
There are traffic count, I don't know the most, yes, they do regular traffic counts. Brian, do you have any idea? I'm thinking like 2013 to 2017.
Yeah, the last traffic study, I think, was done with the senior development that went in. Comfort Care did it.
But they do regular traffic counts, and it is posted. You actually can go to SEMCOG's website, and they will have in most of the current traffic data. So I haven't looked at that recently for Dixie Highway on White Lake Road yet, but I believe it's there.
That would be- So we could feel fairly comfortable in using those numbers as being close estimates to current situation.
Yeah, I think particularly there is other data too that we would want to use, such as crash data that is put in that documentation, and that's your starting point to when you start with some of the state and the county agencies, with that kind of data, and say, here's our circumstances. Now, where do we go from here? Yeah.
Very good. Yes, Sam.
Another note, the meeting before last, we approved the logo and branding funding for the township that everyone's been dragging on for a decade of trying to get all in cahoots on a uniform logo. So there's been hesitation to put up new signs like for the parks and things because everybody's got 5 different logos. We're also trying to find we approved, we got approval from the township board to get funding to hire a company for branding. So like, Stay and Play or Gateway to the North, or how all these other communities have, which we don't have. We've identified that a good portion of the people that live in Independence Township think they live in Clarkston because they don't know the difference between the two. So that's a hurdle that we're trying to figure out how Independence Township can become its own place other than the mailing address. So that's a big deal. This thing's been kicked down the road for decades, trying to get a thing together. So that was something that Supervisor Jose got approval in the meeting before last. So that's between that and the grant writer. I mean, we're outside of the DDA. We're getting funding and approval through the township board to support us in this effort that's going to help us move along too. So that's huge. Because again, if we changed the plan to involve securing property possibly, and that would be for entranceway signs that we've been trying to get forever. And but that wouldn't do us any good if we have no approved sign, which we don't have now. So that's a huge deal. So some of the loose ends the supervisor's been really working on to get them, and the township board's been generally supportive of that. So trying to chip off some stuff before we start having our, like, what do we want to do meetings and plans, get some of this other stuff rolling already. Also, I was talking to Kim Feigley today, our assessor. We're trying to find out to get some documentation on incentives for people to come here and invest in the district. What programs, there's some programs that are available that we want to be well versed on. So when we go out and solicit investment, we can be different than other communities. We also had come up with some other ideas when we did the revitalization studies of Dixie Highway back in 08?
2014.
14, was it?
2014, I believe.
So we had done a lot of stuff on that I can bring in when we get to the nuts and bolts, my files from those. Like we met with the state police about speed limits, what would be the, find out that if you ask for a speed limit study, most likely the speed on Dixie Highway will go up. It won't go down because speed limits are based upon the average speed a car travels. So if your average car speed, like if the speed limit right now is 45 miles an hour and the average car travels 60, they're not going to lower it to 40, they're going to make it 55 because it's the irregular speeds that cause accidents. So speed's based upon, that's why expressway speed limits keep rising, because the average car keeps driving faster. So you don't want a car doing 75 and a car doing 55. But that's how it works. So we had to be real careful that we weren't triggering a study that was going to hurt us in the long run. So there's some caveats you need to know before you just, which we kind of vetted those back in the old study. So we can get past some of that to excel faster. But that's kind of how that works, which it seems crazy, but it does make sense. If you're trying to get everybody to go the same speed, that can be an adverse effect of that too. So there's some stuff that we already did, and Dick's done plenty also that he can bring to the table to not reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff.
I have to admit, that's one of the more crazy things I've heard, but that, so if you could drive 50 down a residential street and eventually change the speed limit to 45.
Well,
But I think.
the speed limit on Pine Knob Road in front of my house is 55 miles an
That's
hour
crazy.
on a
That's
dirt
crazy.
road.
But I guess my question would be is,
Yeah.
does local government have any control over any kind of input into that? Because, going 60 on Dixie Highway, they're going 60 now, so.
Well, the point of the story is that the likelihood of going down
Is
from
not
where
gonna
we're
happen,
at now
right,
is
yeah.
not very probable, and sparking that dialogue could force them to raise it.
Well,
So,
What if we
That's
ask
part of
for
the
a
problem that we
roundabout?
have
We
on
don't
Dixie
wanna
Highway is that
study.
there is absolutely no interruption of traffic
right.
from Andersonville to Mabee Road. It's 2 miles without a traffic light. And that's, those are the kinds of things that we want to explore with MDOT in terms of things that we can do to try to calm traffic. So traffic calming, whatever that term ends up meaning, is going to be what's going to end up helping to control speed.
Wouldn't a proposed roundabout at Dixie and White Lake slow traffic down? Wouldn't that be a potential and then you would avoid the accidents that occur because people think the light's gonna change even though it's not gonna change and they go to turn left
Yeah.
immediately?
It's a high, Brian, isn't White Lake a high percentage accident location?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you like home, there's another accident.
But it's also a US highway, so,
So isn't that
Yeah,
why
but
we
it's under the
qualify for a
jurisdiction of
roundabout though
it's
on
under
the
the
highway?
jurisdiction of MDOT. They're, the jurisdiction is assigned to MDOT to deal with it.
I don't even know if you could move that kind of volume through a roundabout.
Okay,
without-
well, we're getting a little off track.
Yeah.
If I could say one more thing,
Yeah.
Sam, I hope you didn't take our comments as that you were telling us something crazy. I think it's the state of Michigan coming up with this average speed of a car, and all of a sudden that changes the speed limit. But I guess one of the things that we're concerned about, and I'll just speak as a neighbor
Sure.
and a resident, is we have incredible difficulty now, more than ever, getting in and out of
Yeah.
our residential development.
Yeah.
White Lake Road is a disaster because they're coming over the hill so fast. So the only reason I mentioned traffic studies there is if you're gonna pick one that's gonna impact the most residents that are inside this DDA, I would study, White Lake and Dixie where it surrounds our development,
Yeah.
because that is just, it's an accident waiting to happen. And the
Well,
only,
It's
I just
it's an
wanna,
accident that does happen.
well,
actually.
but
Is it turning left
that's why I
out of
say,
there?
so
Yes.
whatever we have to do to study
Either
it.
way.
I think we agree. I think we agree on that
Yes.
point, that that's a real problem.
Yeah. That's all. I won't perseverate on it. I'm just saying that'd be one I'd
Look,
study.
It's, that's one of the reasons why we included it. So,
Yeah.
So, we are,
But I will look into see what we can do.
So I was just, so to put additional stoplights in, does that require a traffic study?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it requires traffic study, which they have this process where there has to be certain warrants. That's a word that the traffic people use, warrants to, in other words, they have to have it has to meet certain criteria, which they call warrants, to have a traffic light installed.
Yeah, and so I apologize, I'm really ignorant on this subject, but to Sam's point, it feels like the chicken or the egg here, because I can't get his traffic study without raising the speed
Oh,
limit.
no, this is a different
And
type of, no.
I can't
he's-
put
Speed limit
stoplights in
study is
without
different than a traffic
Yeah.
study.
This is
Two totally different
They're
things.
they're two different animals. The speed
Okay.
studies, yeah, the speed studies are actually done by the state police.
Okay,
Traffic studies are done by traffic engineers
gotcha, okay.
that
Okay,
either are
gotcha.
from the road agencies or privately employed.
I know this has been talked about in our neighborhood groups, but a crosswalk on White Lake near our entrance, because I believe the element, and I apologize because I have a middle school kid and a kid who hasn't entered elementary school yet, but I believe the middle school bus does drop off and then turn around and drop off on the other side. But from my understanding from my middle school son, the middle school bus drops off in front of our neighborhood, and those kids that live on the other side have to cross White Lake Road, and it is very dangerous. I mean, I as an adult don't want to cross White Lake Road without a light, so it's, I mean, that's obviously a concern as well, not necessarily for our neighborhood because it drops off in our neighborhood, but for the kids who live on the other side, it's a concern.
Are you thinking crosswalk like the one they have on Sashabaw by the elementary school?
By North
McLaren?
Sashaba?
By McLaren?
By McLaren. Is that what you're?
Oh, yeah,
Thinking
I mean,
about?
yeah, something like that, or, I mean,
Those can be very dangerous too, because
I-
people just,
well,
they're not,
yeah,
act-
but-
That
They're
one.
they're not
unassuming.
activated very often, so
Yeah.
you gotta really be paying attention that all of a sudden a crosswalk's popping into play
Yeah.
when you've spent 10, days in a row not having
I'm
one.
going to say, all
Yeah.
of this kind of stuff is,
Yeah.
let me tell you something. We have, I think we've got a lot of volunteers to be on committees here, because there's, we're not going to solve these tonight,
Sure.
but we're setting in motion the means to be able to solve some of these issues that you're bringing up. So, I didn't mean to cut off discussion, but I'm just saying, I know that I want to kind of stick to what's in the plan here, so that, because we are on a deadline to get this adopted by the township board before May.
Sure. And I was looking at the schedule. It looks like this meeting, we're supposed to make a motion to recommend to the board
If you're ready.
that the plan is ready. If we all agree that the plan is ready. And isn't there, what's the time frame that you have to allow for public comment?
Well, you don't have to, you're not.
The board.
From the township board, once you make your adoption, we have some advertising notification requirements that have to be put in place. The township's clerk, the notice has already been written and ready to go. As soon as this plan is on its way to the township board, there has to be like a couple of notifications that has to be posted in 20 places. It's got to be done at least 20 days before the public hearing. So we're in good shape now, but if we don't move forward now, we're not going to make the May deadline. So this is kind of a critical date tonight.
Okay. So I guess the most important question this evening would be, is there any recommendations for things that need to be changed or clarified on the plan before we make a motion to approve it for being set forth in front of the board?
Yeah, thank you.
Do we need to ask whether any of the community members who might be attending online have any questions? We've answered them in the room.
Sure. Is there anybody watching live from public that wants to make any comment or have any questions?
Nobody's on.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
I don't know. Where on there do you see that people?
Mr. Chairman, the proper procedure here would be for the Citizens Advisory Committee to first make a recommendation to you,
Okay.
and then you to make your motion to recommend, hopefully, approval to the township board. So I think what we want to ask for is a motion from the CAC for a recommendation to the DDA board to adopt the plan, and a vote from this board on that. So
I'll make a motion. So first, I want to say it's very well prepared, so congratulations to everyone. But I would request that, or make a recommendation and a motion to go ahead and instruct the DDA board that we are in concurrence and support of the plan and to take it forward to the township board.
is there a second from the CAC?
Second.
Okay, we got a second here.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right.
Great. Now it's up to you.
And now,
I'll make a motion.
Make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the township board to adopt the development plan and tax increment financing plan for Independence Township Downtown Development Authority as presented to be approved.
And second?
okay, all those all those
In favor.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right.
Good job. Good job.
We're ready.
Thank you very much. Now the real work begins.
Yeah, for real. So, we've already, I believe we've already done item K, which is the authority comment.
Yeah.
And if there's not any other comments, then we can make a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn the meeting of the DDA.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Productive meeting.
Good.